Welcome to Nice and Blunt. We're back for another podcast episode with Angus McKay. He's been on the channel a couple times now, most recently a couple days ago. So happy to have him back. Now we're post subscriber league draft. What are your takeaways from that draft, Angus?
Well, like you, I felt that draft was very intense. That was my first auction draft of the season, so the first one is the most intense I feel, and that's why I needed a vacation, which
Yeah,
is why you could see the palm tree behind me.
yeah,
Lovely times for sure.
you made it all the way to Hawaii in just one night.
I, I definitely had a draft experience where in the I thought I was killing it in the beginning. I thought I got great value, honestly, on Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. They were some targets I had for sure.
You did you
Where
just
I
you did pay for Brees Hall at a 101 price tag, just to be clear.
100%, but I thought I would have to go see when I was doing my pre-draft budget, I thought, oh, this is a $70 player. Like what I think of Breece Hall, I was like, he should be going for $70.
Yeah, but that didn't happen. You got him at 63.
And I
$1
was
more
fine,
than CMC.
which certainly with the way that the draft was going, I was fine with it. I
Yeah.
think Breece certainly I don't participate in a lot of snake drafts and I don't have the 101 this year. I am scared of CMC. Like that's the one pick where I'm like, because you have to take him at 101 just because of who he is.
Only
But
way
it
to get him.
feels like it's the only way to get him, and you kind of should take him at the 101. But personally, gun to my head, I'd rather have Brees or Bijan than
Okay.
CMC.
Well, you got your guy.
Personally, and so I got my guy. And I think if he is in that running back tier that I think he is, he could separate from the other running backs and give me that weekly edge.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's safer. Obviously, McCaffrey has a longer track record, but at age 28, coming off a 20 game season, I mean, it was 19, but either way, like so many touches.
Already with a calf injury,
Yeah.
and again, that stuff's, and it probably is going to be nothing, but it's just one more thing on the pile where I'm like, man,
w-
like it's just,
We also haven't had a repeat RB1 in such a long time. He's probably going to finish top three no matter what, but the odds that he finishes first are not great. But yeah,
yeah. My
they're
my
both
theory
great picks.
With McCaffrey, it's like I feel he's going to be the 101 until he has the year he falls off. And so you're that's going to happen, I feel. And so I'd rather
Eventually.
and I'm not saying it's going to be this year. He might have a great year this year, but I think it will eventually happen. And I'd rather not be on the train when it happens.
Yeah, you're willing to be a year early on that call than a year
Mhm.
late, and that's fine. Should we talk about your team?
Let's do it.
All right. So, oh, I'm getting used to this. Um, there we go. Here it is. I have it on the screen. Your team, hit and run is the team name, and starting roster quarterback at the moment you have Trevor Lawrence. You also have Jared
Mhm.
Goff on the bench, but running back one Brees Hall, as we mentioned. RB2 is Chase Brown. Receivers Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson. Real tough to go against that. But tight end Kyle Pitts, JSN is the flex. Bengals defense, which has a great matchup week one. Not sure if you'll stick
Mhm.
with them all season
No,
long, but
they have the Chiefs next, so they will not be there
yeah,
week two. But I'll take them for week one.
yeah. Patriots week one, they're at worst like a top four
Mhm.
defense. I think I'm gonna have them at one on the
Yeah.
rankings. But Matt Gay is the kicker, and then real quick overview of the bench. You got Jordan Addison, Jared Goff, as we mentioned, and then a bevy of handcuff running backs because that position is a little thin behind Brees Hall for you. You got Braylon Allen, the
Mhm.
handcuffed in the Jets offense, Marshawn Lloyd, Kamani Vidal, Khalil Herbert, and then you also opted for a Kendry Miller
Mhm.
draft, which I'll be honest with you, I think he'll be cutting him soon, but he's on IR, so
Yep.
it's excusable. It's fine.
And if he
Um,
wasn't on IR, I wouldn't have drafted him, is the thing.
okay,
So I'm perfectly fine keeping him there. But immediately, if one of my other players needs to go to IR, he will be dropped.
yeah,
So yeah, for now, he's fine to just sit there and take advantage of that extra roster spot.
for a dollar when you are in the spot where like whoever you're nominating is immediately on your roster, knowing that it comes
Yeah.
with some flexibility, I think is a perfectly fine pick. But
Mhm.
yeah, tell us about your strategy here, how it worked out for you.
So yeah, I didn't go into it with the idea that I was going to take Brees Hall. I ideally wanted to get one of him or Bijan, and Brees came up first. I felt he was underpriced at 63. I know he ended up being the 101 in terms of price, but I still, at least by my own personal valuation, felt that he was well worth it. I mean, I drafted Brees Hall everywhere his rookie year because I remember seeing the upside of Brees Hall. And what I truly believe my Brees Hall stance is and has always been, I think at the end of his career, he's going to be a top five running back in NFL history. Like I really do. I think that's
Wow.
in the cards. I think he'll be spoken of at the end of his career in the same breath as like Adrian Peterson, Marshall Faulk, like these people were like, oh my God, you are amazing. I think talent wise, it's all there for him. Offensive scheme wise, it's there for him. Like that's in his range of outcomes. And I'd rather be a part of it. I didn't take him at all last year because he did have the ACL injury, and that just made me nervous in general.
I
So I
was
yeah.
a little nervous, but with such a big price discount last year, after what I saw in year one, I was all in last year, and I was definitely trying to bid you on Brees Hall. He was nominated first, and I was like, all right, let me
Mhm.
go for it. I think it was down to us two.
Mhm.
Maybe it was someone else, but I know I was in close to $60 on Brees Hall, and last year I got him at $19, and obviously it was a slow
Mhm.
start, but like I was so ecstatic
Oh
about the
yeah.
return on investment on that. So knew I was never going to get him for that price, and you went a little higher than I did at 63. Did go for the 101, but not by like a wide margin, and he was
Mhm.
cheaper than the pre-draft value. I think because of how our draft winded up, almost all of the running backs had an uh, increased price tag from
Mhm.
where they were projected to go, at least on
Mhm.
ESPN. Those
Mhm.
pre-draft values are kind of bullshit in the first place. But
Yeah.
overall, collectively, running back was more coveted in this
Mhm.
auction draft. So you have,
And I did feel more comfortable knowing I had that pillar running back
yeah,
like in the draft.
it,
There was
it's a
never a moment where I was
luxury.
like where I was like, oh my God, I have to get James Cook or oh my I mean granted he went
Hmm.
for a value, but that tier of running backs, I feel like if you have it in your mind, I have to get one of these guys or else I'm done. That's a scary spot to be in, especially as
Yeah,
people have more money than you potentially because you got other positions. Like it's such a comfort to know I've got this. And I'm just of the opinion the one position you could figure out in season is your RB2. Like if you're gonna have a weakness anywhere, make it your RB2 spot. So knowing I've got a top running back, that's comforting.
I only drafted four running backs, and one of them was Jonathan Brooks, and I felt so comfortable because I had Jameer Gibbs and Isaiah Pacheco
Mhm.
in the first like 10 picks off the board, where it was like, okay, I don't need to focus on like elite depth. I can let those other positions come to me at
Mhm.
good values and kind of ignore the price runs on running back as it goes through the draft. And I think I lucked out with a potential like true steal, potential league winner. I got Rico Dowdle at $1 at the end, and like holy shit,
Mhm.
that has so much upside for that
He's a
price.
good
Oh my god.
he's a good take a peek kind of player where like you could like the difference between him and Zach Charbonnet, right? Like Zach Charbonnet, you're never cutting because he's just always this perpetual handcuff to Kenneth Walker. Like he's just going to sit in your lineup even if he doesn't have a great role. Rico Dowdle, you could see by week 2, 3, hey, this is an off split between Zeke, Dalvin Cook, and Rico Dowdle. Like but my point being, you could move off him pretty quickly, and he's not going to clog up your bench if you see it's not working out.
Yeah.
But with other running backs, there's that element of, oh, I feel like I can't cut this person because there's this upside if someone ahead of them gets hurt. So you're cut like even if Zach Charbonnet is doing nothing for you, you're sitting there like, well, what if Ken Walker gets hurt? That's why I'm holding this guy. So he gives you like it's like last year. Similarly, I took Rashad Bateman with my last pick, and I was like, okay, I'll see 2 weeks. If he's not part of the offense, I'll cut him and then move on and get someone from the waiver wire. So it's a good pick to have for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. You also went with somebody else who ended up being valued as a top 12 player in Garrett Wilson, and I don't think you were planning to go double double jet there, but you took Garrett Wilson for $50. How
So
what happened there?
so I I think I think Garrett Wilson's this year's CeeDee Lamb. I really do. I think it's shockingly similar. I think it's in his range of outcomes to be a top three wide receiver this year. I felt this last year too, where you just see someone who has little to no target competition in an offensive scheme. Nathaniel Hackett comes from a Mike McCarthy offense where the goal of the offense is to get your number one wide receiver in advantageous matchups and then target them. That's why Devontae Adams was so good. That's why CeeDee Lamb's really good now, because the offense is designed to get them the ball. So Garrett Wilson is in that same sort of category. And he like even if you don't think Rodgers is MVP caliber anymore, I think he's going to be at least a league average quarterback. And even if he misses time, I think Tyrod Taylor is still an improvement over Zach Wilson.
At least there's
So he
that.
should.
Yeah, but
And so that's what made me more confident in Garrett Wilson, that no matter what, we seemingly have just better quarterback play coming to him. And I think in terms of talent, yeah, he's in that same category as those elite wide receivers. I think next year it's in the cards that he goes as a top three wide receiver if everything stays the same next year, and like Rodgers. So I'm personally just very high
he's got
on
that
Garrett Wilson.
potential. Yeah, he's never lived up to that hype. Like we saw some flashes as his rookie season, but they weren't like consistent. And then obviously last year was just a brutal letdown. But the volume's gonna be there. Like there's so many touches just locked up with both
Mhm,
Jets, and as long as Rodgers stays healthy, you have potential at worst a top five guy. Like
mhm,
I think I have him ranked seven, and that
mhm,
doesn't factor in where he could finish. He could outperform maybe even Tyreek Hill. It's possible.
mhm.
I'm not saying that's a lock to happen, but it is possible. It's definitely a good swing.
100%.
So
Yeah, and then kind of similarly with Justin Jefferson, that was not to deviate from Garrett Wilson too quickly, but that was the pick where I wasn't planning on it. And definitely I thought I was getting good value on him. Or like that was the exact number that I had written down, I think for 55, where I
yeah,
was
you got
like,
him for
that is
55.
exactly the most I'd pay for him and still feel I was getting a good price. And I ended up getting him. But if whoever it was clicked one more time, I wouldn't have done it. And once I had him, at first I was like, oh shoot, I'm not sure this is going to put me in a tricky spot to get some other targets I want later. But I'm happy with how it rounded out. But that was definitely a bit of a luxury pick for me where I felt like, oh, okay, now I have this person. But I'm still pretty stoked about it.
You're locked into elite production at receiver, that's for sure. I went
Mhm,
ahead and wrote down all of the prices and broke them down into like a um round by round breakdown. And so
mhm,
I'll try to put this on the screen here. Here's Angus's team in the green. Angus can't see it, but the viewers at home can see it. He had Brees Hall at 63, Justin Jefferson 55, Garrett Wilson 50, and then his next highest priced draft pick was
mhm,
$11 Kyle Pitts. So this
mhm,
amounted to essentially three top 12 round one picks in Brees Hall, Jefferson, and Garrett Wilson. Then he took another stab what amounted to a sixth round pick with Kyle Pitts. Then with Chase Brown, he got back in the eighth round. Then with JSN
mhm,
and Braylon Allen for $3, got in a little bidding war on Braylon Allen. But those were basically two 10th round picks. You have Jordan Addison for $2, an 11th round pick. And then you had 7 players for $1 a piece that all were basically like somewhere between round 12 and round 15 on your roster.
mhm,
So definitely more weighted towards like double digit round selections, but three
mhm,
guys in round one who, as long as they don't go down, for a fact are putting up really stellar numbers. Um, the team a little top heavy, but definitely
mhm.
is a nightmare gauntlet to face when you have Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall looking back at you as an
100%.
opponent.
And yeah, I definitely like with most teams, like I think this is true of any fantasy team. If like your most expensive player gets hurt and is out for the season, you're in a bad way anyways. Even
Yeah.
if you were like, even if you then got pretty good depth, it's like if CeeDee Lamb goes down, you're still pretty screwed. Like that's a really rough thing, and you're
Yeah.
probably not winning. So I feel so
Real
like even though
hard.
yeah, I'm quite top heavy, I feel like that application of oh, if so and so goes down, you're in trouble. That's kind of true for most people.
Yeah.
So
You can't predict injury.
um
It's always a
yeah.
factor and it's always hard to come back from. But if it doesn't happen, you've got elite guys and you got some swings at RB, hoping for some
Mhm.
breakouts there. I mean, we're not expecting anything at the beginning of the season from Braylon Allen, Marshawn Lloyd, Kimani Vidal. But if one of those ends up being a workhorse, then you've got a stellar, at worst, flex play. Maybe they could even
Mhm.
overtake Chase Brown, who is definitely appealing. I think he's a safe guy to grab right now, but there is a world where Zach Moss completely takes over. Are you concerned about that at all?
So I'm more in the Chase Brown camp than the Zach Moss camp
Okay,
anyways
I'm
for a
I'm
couple
the other
different
side.
reasons. So the reason why I feel that way is A, Zach Moss's contract. It's not like a massive running back
No, it's like maybe
contract.
four and a half, 5 mil.
So it's not like they went out there and are like, he's our guy. Let's go. Like we want to make sure we get it. So he's not getting paid a ton of money, so you don't have that going for him. He's also just he's been in the NFL 3 years and has had like spurts of really good production, but on the whole has not been a great running back. Like, yeah, he looked good at times last year, but he gets hurt pretty consistently. He looked good last year until he didn't, and that's kind of like the Zach Moss story. So the idea that that would happen, like that for the fourth year, the same thing that happened in the prior 3 years would happen, that makes a lot of sense to me. I felt like the contract for Zach Moss kind of showed a little bit of faith in Chase Brown. Like if they had gone out and paid someone a lot of money or targeted an elite free agent running back, then I'd be like, oh, cool. They don't have a ton of faith in Chase Brown because they feel that that's a position of need with Mixon leaving. There's a lot of reports of Chase Brown running with the ones. Chase Brown for sure. Like he handled a workhorse role in college. He's got the build for it. In the preseason, he definitely made some mistakes for sure. Like he kept trying to bounce to the outside instead of just going up the gap. And I know NFL coaches don't really like to see that. So I just think that there's a lot. Like if I was to bet on one of the two breaking out and taking the job, I think I'd pick Chase Brown over Zach Moss, mostly just because I've seen 3 years of Zach Moss not being able to hold on to an elite starting job and then just kind of losing it, whether it's injury or his own inability to perform.
Chase Brown has the higher upside. I think from
Mhm.
a league winning standpoint, there's a world where Chase Brown truly takes over, and that's probably like never going to be the case for Zach Moss. Like I could see him having a bigger role, but never a three down role as long as Chase Brown is
Mhm.
healthy. Whereas Brown could
Mhm.
actually slot in as the three down guy where he's just that efficient, that consistent. And it's like, no, we don't
Mhm.
we don't really need Moss. He's not on a long term deal, so we don't have to commit to him. But my only pushback is from a like goal line standpoint. Moss is definitely more of like a better build. He's also been a really efficient player on the goal line since he was with the Bills. I've been high on him from those days for those reasons where it was like Zach Moss is the type of guy who doesn't need 15 plus touches. He can only get like 11 randomly, and that could turn into a 15 fantasy point game because of his touchdown
Mhm.
ability. So that's where I think I'm still in the Zach Moss camp. But if he didn't perform so well for the Colts when the opportunity was available, I don't think I would have that stance. I might be a little bit like
Mhm.
jaded or focused on like the numbers when he was the three down starter with Indianapolis, but there's a world where Chase Brown, just takes a long time to get going. He's also just a fifth round
Mhm.
pick. I still see more of a committee there, but if one of them was going to close the season as the three down guy while both are healthy, I think it would be more likely Chase Brown than Moss. But
100%.
we're going to see. We're going to find out.
For me, a big one was that P. Ryan, once cut, didn't go back to Cincy. That was my biggest
Yeah,
worry, is
that's
thinking
nice.
like, oh, if they go get him, then that means that they're not confident in their depth. So again, for me, that was another, at least, and again, this is me trying to convince myself of something, right? You know, that fun thing we all do where you see a bit of information, you're like, clearly this means, but I was like, no, they could have gone and gotten Samaje Perine. They didn't. The Chiefs did. Right? He went to the Chiefs, I think so.
Yeah, he's now
I'm
with the
not
Chiefs.
mistaken. So if the Bengals really wanted to, they could have made a play to get Samaje Perine back. He knew their offense, and I feel like that would have made me immediately cast aside both Zach Moss and Chase Brown because I think, okay, great. Even the Bengals aren't confident in these two. So
Yeah, the
yeah, that at least made me feel better that the Bengals, seemingly on some level, were like, no, we don't need to go get one of these people. We're fine with what we have. And whether that is bullish for Zach Moss or Chase Brown, like it can go either way. But still, I was like, hey, that seems pretty good.
All right. Well, I've got plenty of opportunity to talk about my roster in the future, so maybe we'll pivot to some other things, unless there's one last thing you want to mention about your team. Well, it looks like we had a little minor technical difficulty there. You're no longer in Hawaii,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, budget ran out, and so I have to go back into the closet.
bummer. Bummer. Phrasing. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, or do you want to move
No,
on to some other topics?
I I think I got a real winner here. You're all pretty fucked.
Good luck. Yeah. Uh, as long as Kyle Pitts doesn't screw you over, then
I know, my God.
we'll see how that goes.
Once I did it, I was like, all right. Well, that was you've done this before, and I think you did this several times in the draft where you're like, you make a stance and you
Yeah.
make an argument. You're like, well, I might as well put my money where my mouth is. Like I gave an opinion. Let's see. You might as well stand by it.
Good
And that's
luck
what
with
that was.
that. If anything, if he's gonna prove it wrong, this would be the year for that to happen.
Yeah.
So let's hope for the best for your sake. But uh, where we want to pivot to? You gave me some topics.
So one we can do, it has to do with your team. This isn't in the order that I sent it to you, but we could talk about T. Higgins.
Okay, yeah, I sure. I ended up drafting T. Higgins. I'll just show my roster on the screen real quick, but we won't really get into too many details on
Hmm.
mine. I'm sure I'll have plenty of opportunities for that in the future. But T. Higgins is coming into my flex play. I drafted him for I want to say $15. Yeah,
Hmm.
$15, which amounted to a fifth round pick. I got T. Higgins for a mid fifth round pick. So at least on
Hmm.
Underdog, he was going like top of the fourth. Obviously, that's a
Hmm.
format that pushes up receivers in general, but I was very comfortable with that value there on T.
Hmm.
Higgins for $15.
Oh, sure. I mean, with Higgins, I like he feels very much this year like Brandon Ayuk felt last year, which is like pretty undervalued for what he could do. And like again, every report out of camp has been this he's been having the best camp of his career. The connection with Joe Burrow is there. We've seen in the preseason games, he's the first read option for Joe Burrow. He's playing for a contract this year because the Bengals already showed him that they're not keeping him. And also like Chase isn't practicing
Yeah,
still.
that
Like he just really
that's
isn't, and he's not getting the reps with Joe Burrow. Like I still think Chase is elite, and if he comes back
yeah.
this year, he'll be fine. But it could take him a few games to warm up. And Jamar Chase kind of strikes me as the player who would sit out for a good amount of time on principle. And
It's
coupled with that,
possible.
like even Ocho Cinco said that, where he was like, I think a deal's going to get done for Chase, but I don't see him stepping on the field without a deal. Like I think that could very easily happen for a couple of games. And the big thing is Cincinnati's ownership is famously cheap. Like they
Yeah.
didn't have an indoor practice facility until like this past year. AJ Hawk on the Pat McAfee show has talked about how the weight room when he was there was basically archaic because they didn't want to spend money on it. So it's a very cheap franchise.
Hmm.
And Chase is asking them to do something franchises normally don't have to do, which is pay the receiver early. So I could see
Yeah.
that franchise digging in and saying, no, we're not going to do this.
Yeah, that was the
So
thing about
I,
his holdout where it was like, while yes, you are like this elite receiver, at least with Ayuk and CeeDee Lamb, like they're going into the fifth year their fifth year option this season. Jamar was drafted a year after them, so he's asking for all of this a season early. And while I don't
Mhm.
see him sitting out like a full season, that I think that would be ridiculous. There's a world where maybe week one he just reminds them like, yeah, you kind of miss me. I don't think they need him against the Patriots
Mhm.
either. But
Mhm.
just for context, he did sit out that COVID year after Joe
Mhm.
Burrow was drafted. So that was a different
Mhm.
situation though. Like I don't blame him for sitting out the COVID year at all. That's why I don't think he would miss more than like one game. But I could see a world where he doesn't get his contract, just because it's the Bengals, and
Mhm.
he's not in that fifth year option anymore. So,
Mhm.
or it's not coming up, anyways. But yeah, the fact that he isn't hasn't been practicing some elite chemistry developing. That's one reason why I was so high on Jake Ferguson, where it was like, well, this is clearly
Mhm.
like the number two option. I didn't really apply to me with worries about Ayuk, so I was maybe
Yeah.
just a little bit
No, that's
convinced about
different. To
that.
the moon, baby.
But it worked out for me. Ayuk signed, and I'm probably gonna contemplate benching him week one against Sauce Gardner. But I think
Yeah.
season long Ayuk will be excellent. But yeah, Jake Ferguson, T Higgins. I also drafted Jake Ferguson, but they're both benefiting from being the clear best option for a really good throwing quarter. Like there aren't that many passers that are better than Joe Burrow. Dak is still in the top 12 at worst in terms of passers. You could argue he's top
Mhm.
5. He was an MVP candidate last season. So
For sure.
knowing that there's so much volume going there, and also Burrow, the only way it doesn't work out with Higgins is if Burrow gets hurt. Like that's why he was so
Mhm.
bad last season. It was just like a terrible situation, and he wants to get paid. And once he like signed his franchise tag and was like, all right, I'm gonna come to camp and report. Like I'm not gonna get fined. I'm sure Burrow came up to him and was like,
Mhm.
yo man, like I get it. This is a tough situation long term, but like let's win a chip and you get like this monster deal next season and we go out on top as winners. And like,
Mhm.
that's where I think he has all the motivation in the world to perform well, because I don't see them franchising him a second year in a row. And I think he knows that. Like it would be a drastic pay bump for them to do that again. And if they have to pay Jamar, they can't really afford that luxury receiver. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
really really excited to have T Higgins as my flex play. I passed on like the top 5, top 6, like those elite round one receivers. I passed on. I went with Nico Collins,
Mhm.
Brandon Ayuk, and T Higgins. I've got some solid bench depth, I think, at receiver as well. But
Mhm.
yeah, for him to be on my roster as the flex as like a mid fifth round pick, really like the price, and
100%.
very excited about him as well.
Yeah, ton of upside there. I again, even just from a developing connection standpoint, and the fact that there's a non-0% chance Chase sits out for considerable amounts of time, like that's again, Higgins was a round two receiver just the other year. So
Yeah,
he's that level of talent. That offense is projected to be that good. So yeah, it's a great pick.
2 seasons ago when Burrow was healthy, played a full season. T Higgins was a top 15 receiver on a per game basis.
Mhm.
So very very
Mhm.
excited about his potential. Is there anyone else you want to pivot to? You
A big
mentioned
one.
Trey
Yeah,
McBride.
yeah, even though I touted on the last stream how great I think Kyle Pitts is, I do have McBride as my tight end one. Um, I think that's pretty a smash for me, and I know the person in our league was able to pair them with Kyler. I love that move. That's a really, really solid foundational
Yeah,
piece. I could see McBride pacing all tight ends in catches and in receptions. He's just gonna be. He's essentially their check down option, and once he was given the starting role over Zach Ertz, he was just phenomenal last year. And I really don't
yeah,
think, like everyone was concerned about Marvin Harrison coming in. I don't think they compete for the same targets. Like Marvin Harrison specifically is coming in to be that X receiver on the outside because that's what they needed in order to open up their offense. So they're not competing for the same type of target. He should still have at minimum a 20% target share. I could see it being even more than that. Defensive secondaries could focus in on Marvin Harrison if he is that elite level breakout prospect that we all think he is, and that just is going to free up things for McBride to beat linebackers over the middle.
Yeah, he's such a safe option. I recently bumped
Mhm.
him up above Mark Andrews with that car accident and minor concerns that he might
Mhm.
miss week 1. I doubt it, but it's
Yeah.
just lingering in the back of my mind. He was hurt last year.
Oh,
There's
sure.
just none of that at all with McBride. He's so safe, and yeah, he has such a different role than Marvin Harrison where like
Mhm.
obviously there's not as big of a target share available anymore, but it's not going to impact him. If anything, it might open up some
Mhm.
looks in the red zone that he previously didn't have last year. That was kind of holding him back from that like
Mhm.
true tight end one potential was the
Mhm.
touchdown production. Last year, I think he only scored like 3 touchdowns all season, if I'm not mistaken.
100%. And a good analogy for that is like, I don't think Hollywood Brown in Kansas City impacts Travis Kelce at all. Like they are running different routes.
No,
It's a complete, it's like you could say, oh, Holly Brown's going to take targets from Kelce. Is he? Like it's not the same type of target. It's just completely different. It's different spots on the field. I really don't, it's just competing for different types of targets in the offense.
but on the contrary, like just to play devil's advocate, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Mhm.
is far superior than any receiver the Chiefs have.
So, but that being said, and this is my apprehension with Malik Neighbors, who I'm also high on, and thought I was going to get for a steal in the draft, but then I think it was Matt. He just got bid up so
Well,
I got
you
down to like the one. It was one of those annoying things where I got down to the one, and you're like, and then just no, it's like five bids come in because five people all collectively said no and stopped
well,
you.
you spent over 3/4 of your budget on 3 players, so you kind of
Mhm.
you kind of got boxed out of a lot of other values later on.
100%.
But
But what the point I'm getting at is like let's look at the like two elite receiver prospects who are now the best receivers in the NFL in Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, right? And let's assume for a second Marvin Harrison is the same caliber in the same group as them. Chase and Jefferson in their first year going into their second year saw increases in target share and efficiency. So their first year was not their best year, is my point, which kind of lends it that rookie wide receivers, it takes them a while to get going. Like that's a thing that we know in the fantasy community is that hey, sometimes it takes rookie wide receivers to get going, or at least to achieve their full potential of where they're going to be in their career. So I don't know if I think it's not fair to expect Marvin Harrison Jr. to be the apex of his ability this year. I think he could be much better next year. And so if he struggles a little bit or just isn't achieving his maximum in the beginning part of this year, or even this whole year, I wouldn't be surprised, which just kind of helps McBride out.
it's possible. I think you can argue that Jamar Chase's best season actually was his rookie year, though. At least with him. But
Not from a target standpoint. Like you saw the volume go
from an
up quite a bit into that year
efficiency
too.
though, he was
Yeah, sure.
so fucking good as a rookie, and
But
he's
that's
he's
that's the offense trusting them more. Like it's them making a name for themselves in the
yeah.
offense after year one, going into year two, getting respect from his teammates, being like, "Cool, I'm ready to get this alpha target share." Like it's kind of a
Yeah,
thing that, point being, even with the best of the best receivers, year one to year two, you see improvements. And so we could expect that for Marvin Harrison as well, which means he's not going to have his alpha season this year. Odds are.
he'll
He still could do it. I'm not going to bet against it,
he
but
should
just
be
if you look
better
historically,
year 2. I agree with that, but I
yeah.
think he'll still be extremely safe this season. But
The big one's going to be the end zone targets. Like I think that's going to be the big thing is where are those end zone targets going to? How much go to Marvin Harrison? How much go to McBride? Like
the
that's going to be the really big.
the only like big disappointment with Marvin Harrison is that there's no room for error. Like you have to draft him
And
at
that's
that full
yeah.
potential. Whereas well, at least
Oh
with
yeah.
Malik Neighbors, like Neighbors went for 17 in our draft, which is like a top of the fifth. Whereas Marvin
Mhm.
Harrison went for 34, literally double the price, bottom of the second round. And yeah, if he doesn't give you 1,200 plus yards, if he only gives you like 1,100, you're kind of disappointed. But
And
that's
my
still
take on
very
Harrison at
very
that
safe.
price, like that, you are like historically speaking, you are going to be wrong making that bet more than you're going to be right making that
Probably,
bet.
and
And so
that's
I'm usually, and again, could he do it? 100%. He has all the ability to do it. It's all in the cards. That's why he's going there. But I'm just the type of person to not make those types of bets. Because I'm like, all right, I'm gonna be wrong more than I'm gonna be right. So let's just not do it.
More of a reason to just bet on McBride and feel
Yeah, for
comfortable
sure.
for a lot less of an investment. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I understand the logic there. McBride is so fucking safe.
Mhm.
Um, you have an interesting take that St. Brown went
Oh yeah.
for an exorbitant amount in the subscriber league. He technically was the 102. He was tied with Christian McCaffrey for $62. I think it was because of the tier break at wide
Yeah,
receiver in terms of who else was
100%.
available. Like he was taken after all those other top five guys were nominated. But yeah, for context, you got Jefferson at 55, St. Brown went 62, and
Mhm.
Lamb went 60. Tyreek Hill went 54. Jamar Chase also went 54. So,
That is why I do believe like you need to be hyper in auction drafts in general. I know we just had ours, so this is a pre-draft. Like you have to be hyper aware of tiers. And
yeah.
if like you need to get your guy in that tier before the last like two people are up. Because that's where you're going to get the better value. Because yeah, you're going to have a scenario where St. Brown is the literal last of the elite tier. And everyone who doesn't have an elite wide receiver looks at that and says, oh crap, I didn't do it. I need to get an elite receiver. And so that's how you get him bid up that much. But yeah, I think that's way too much
Yeah,
for sure.
once he got to 55, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna accept that I'm pivoting to the next tier, and
Yeah.
I'll still get like plenty of them, but I'm gonna at least save like $20 on my wide receiver one compared to being forced to draft Amon-Ra at 62. He's so safe though.
Yeah.
I think like it's fine just to
Hmm.
have him, like you'd rather wind up with a $0 budget at the end of the draft than save $15 that you don't
Hmm.
use at all. So it's not the end of the world, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's just what happens in a bidding war
For sure.
situation
I
when the
mean,
tier break
again, my
is.
hot take is that I would just take Garrett Wilson over him straight up. Like, and that would be a pretty quick
That's bold.
snap call that I wouldn't even need to think about too much. And I've mentioned this to you before, like my thing with Detroit, like first off, you have an offense that wants to be run heavy. Like that's their offensive philosophy is that they want to be a run first offense. And so I think the best you're hoping for is that they become more 50-50. But still, it's not going to be a pass first offense. We are also as a fantasy community saying, "Oh, Sam Laporta broke out and is going to be the tight end one, and he's going to get better from year one to year two, which means more targets and more usage." We're also like, hey, Jamison Williams, who you did draft, so you're invested in
For
this.
a dollar.
Jamison, but still, you're like, hey, Jamison Williams, elite level prospect, like had a lot of
Potential.
hope,
The
was
potential.
injured, then did the gamble. So everyone thinks he should be good. So if we think he's going to take a step forward, however big or small, get more targets. Gibbs, like pass the definite like the most pass catching specialist running back we've ever seen. Like that's what he did. So we think Gibbs' target share is going to go up with his usage this year while still being a run first offense. So it just seems like before St. Brown had such a lock on this massive target share because he was like, and I took him his year two because I was like, oh, there's no one else here. Like this is clearly St. Brown's offense. So I think there's a reasonable expectation that he is competing. Like this is the most target share competition he has ever had, and it is still going to be a run first offense. So I don't know if he's going to still maintain just this incredible target share that he has for so long. I would instead rather go get someone like Garrett Wilson, who doesn't have the target share competition, who is in an offense that I think is going to pass the ball a fair amount of the times, especially when they're in the red zone. Like that's the big thing for me is that I don't know if he's going to have as many touchdowns as he did previously. For me, Garrett Wilson has like a very clear path to a top three wide receiver, and I don't think St. Brown does.
I I
He'd
think
need injuries.
while maybe you can say that Garrett Wilson has like that top 3 elite upside, you cannot bring up like a floor comparison between the two. Like there's a floor for St. Brown that is like guaranteed top 6 where Garrett Wilson's is not even top 20 if it doesn't go right. Like that's what we saw last year. Like there's a
Yeah.
world where it really burns you and that's why you're paying the discounted price on Garrett Wilson. But like even though yeah, maybe Jameson Williams steps up a little bit, there's still like 75 targets available without Josh Reynolds and Marvin Jones Jr. this season. So there's room for him to improve, and it doesn't change anything. I do expect some more targets for both Gibbs and Laporta, though. So yeah, maybe St. Brown's target share dips a little bit, but they paid him like 28 mil, if not 30 mil this offseason. And like, it's
Oh
still
no,
so
he's good.
narrow, and that
This has
offense is
nothing to
so
do.
good. He's going
Yeah.
to put up another 1,400 plus yards, and they spread it around so much in the red zone. Like, all four of their studs last year, St. Brown, Gibbs, Laporta, and Montgomery, with 13 touchdowns, they all scored at least 10 touchdowns combined a piece last season. So I don't see any risk with St. Brown, and that's why the premium is there. But if you compare him to like the price on Lamb, of course, then yeah, you can say it was too expensive. But it's just the cost you have to pay to get him,
Mhm.
and with no risk, literally no risk at all. I
Mhm.
I don't think I could put Garrett Wilson over St. Brown.
And I definitely get it. My take, like in terms of the floor comment, I think with the addition of Tyrod Taylor, there's a much better floor than Zach. Like Garrett Wilson had like one of the lower catchable ball rates or whatever that is
It's
last year. Like it
better,
was
but
it was it
it's
was
not
one of no, but he is going
the
from
same.
like arguably the worst quarterback play in the NFL to an average quarterback. That's for an elite talent wide receiver, an insane jump. If they could just deliver him accurate balls on a more consistent basis, which I think the combination of both of them really can do, then yeah, I think his floor gets bumped up by so much.
Personally, I'd be a little more pessimistic about Tyrod than you're giving him credit for, but he's definitely going to be better than last season if you are forced
Mhm,
into a backup quarterback situation. That's a fair point. But
mhm.
okay, you're very high on Garrett Wilson. That's very evident. But
Oh yeah.
I also think him just being on the receiver documentary is another reason where it's like, oh, I fucking have to get him. Like,
Yeah.
that's
No, for
definitely,
sure.
if Garrett Wilson was
Dude is
on this
built
year's
different.
receiver, I'm sure he'd be highly coveted next season. But he's gonna have a breakout year. You can't really
Dude
go
is
wrong.
absolutely built different. Like there's nothing like none of it has anything to do with Amon-Ra. Like he had his oblique torn off the bone or whatever it was and played through it. The man's an animal. He does the Game of Thrones style shit where he like reads off the names of all the people drafted in front of him. Like
Yeah,
that, like the dude's intense. And so like and that's why they paid it. Like Dan Campbell talked about it. Like we're paying him because he's like a culture setter and that's the culture we
yeah.
want here. And it's like, no, for sure. Like if like that's the type of culture you're trying to have, so you need to keep this insane motherfucker here. And he's also just really good.
Before we move on, I just will say you're also betting on Ben Johnson, whereas with Garrett Wilson, you're betting on Nat Hackett, and
Yeah,
that's
I still think I'm betting on Rodgers. Is I don't think Ned Hackett's gonna do shit.
that's fine,
But
but you don't have Ben Johnson's mind
that's true.
to fall back on. Um,
Very true.
so that's another factor. But you also gave me Trevor Lawrence, who is on your team,
Mhm.
and I feel like you have
So
been drinking the Kool-Aid since you drafted him.
no, it's full on like the no, this is a good thing. Like when like you lose your job and then lose your apartment and your girlfriend leaves you and you're trying to convince yourself this is the best thing that could ever happen to you. Like but no, like so
Steel is
what
forged
has
in
me
fire.
what has me excited about Trevor Lawrence again is the Jags were doing pretty well last year as a football team up until the injuries really started to hit them. So I think you're going to have
Hmm.
a pass first team because that's the type of offense Doug Peterson likes to run. He was a quarterback. So, you know, like that's what they're going to want to do as a team identity. Yeah, they don't have Ridley there anymore, but they went and got Gabe Davis, who, as far as NFL field stretching receivers goes, is pretty good.
Kind of a one-trick pony, but when he does hit, he does it well.
Well, not I meant more like he is very good at doing his job, which is
Yeah,
stretching NFL defenses, which frees things up for Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas. Like he is going to make it so that those receivers can do better. I don't want Gabe Davis in fantasy, but
no.
I look at him on an offense and say, oh, he historically has been good to make other receivers put up really good numbers. The fun stat I like about Lawrence, he was fourth in pass attempts and sixth in deep pass attempts. Those are stats that usually go hand in hand with putting up a lot of fantasy points. The efficiency just hasn't been there yet.
He was
I know they're
also
losing.
he was also extremely unlucky with touchdowns last
Yes.
year, where
Oh
like
yeah.
there was 6 or 8 touchdowns between Ridley and Zay Jones that if
Yep.
their feet were just like one size smaller would have counted. Like they were
Oh
literally
yeah.
like inches out of bounds on like almost 8 different touchdown connections. So that
For
could
sure.
flip back in his favor. And yeah, there's a world where Lawrence really bounces back. 2 years ago, when he was on like a heater in the last 9 games, he was actually like a
Hmm.
top 7 quarterback for fantasy. He
Yep.
was way better than uh, people give him credit for.
And he's had back-to-back seasons with at least four rushing touchdowns. He runs more than you think he would. Like he's
Hmm.
keeps doing over 300 yards rushing. They do design runs for him. I think with Lawrence, like they realize the offense has to run through him. And that's, I guess, a difference between Goff. Like I have Lawrence in my starting lineup versus Goff. I think the Lions as a team would rather run the ball. But I think the
Fair.
Jags believe we need to put the ball in Trevor's hands, and that's how we're going to win games. Like they still have a good run game with ETN, which is great. But I do think fundamentally they want him to be the one to run the offense through him. And like he was this generational talent spoken of like Caleb Williams is now, like Andrew Luck was. So like the talent is there. Dude's only 25. Like he's just been in the NFL for quite a while, so he's still quite young. Quarterbacks do take time to develop. He was in a really bad situation in the beginning of his career, so there wasn't a ton of success. So the point being, you can expect him to get better. I do think he is that elite level talent. And you just kind of like all it's going to take is to have a little bit better touchdown luck and better passing efficiency. And he could get that. Like he doesn't have an elite alpha wide receiver one, but he's got a lot of very solid receiving weapons that, could elevate. And if Brian Thomas breaks out, bully, like that's great.
Yeah, I have him in the same tier as Goff, where I think they're both like some of the best backups you can find. I would say Goff has a safer floor just because of
Mhm.
how good his offense is comparatively, but I think
Mhm.
from a fantasy standpoint, you do have an unlocked ceiling that Goff just doesn't offer
Mhm.
you because of the rushing
Yeah,
upside. Like that, Goff needs to throw for like 350 and 4 touchdowns to really
sure.
have his true potential. Lawrence could literally give you like 2 rushing touchdowns and like
Mhm.
75 yards on the ground in a random game and also throw for like close to 300 if it's a true shootout.
Mhm.
So he
Mhm.
is capable of giving you a 30 plus point fantasy game that really wins you your week. And on top of that, he also just got paid
Mhm.
tied for like the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. There's a lot of motivation to prove that that was like
100%.
a worthwhile contract. So a lot invested in him. I love the Brian Thomas
Mhm.
edition. I think that'll really pay
Mhm.
dividends. And as long as he stays healthy, that's the key thing. Last year, once he got hurt, it kind of wasn't the same, at least for his like
Mhm.
total offense, but he was actually still like viable. But the last like big red flag that I remember looking into him was his numbers were just kind of mediocre in the beginning of the season because ETN was just vulturing every single touchdown. Like
Mhm.
there was a 4 or 5 game stretch where ETN had like 8 or 9 touchdowns, and
For
that
sure.
that just if one of those per game goes to Lawrence, then Lawrence has far better stats, but it just wasn't happening. So you were like,
For
shit,
sure.
I drafted Lawrence as like a top 7 guy, and I'm not even getting like top 15 numbers right now. This is bullshit. And that's why his price was
Mhm.
deflated this year. But
100%. And that's why
it could easily bounce back.
ETN in season last year regressed quite a bit towards the
Yeah.
mean. Because the beginning of the season, ETN was like the RB1, and everyone was like, how do
Mhm.
you not rank this guy running back one? He's getting two touchdowns a game. And then he just stopped that, like, because it was just, oh, cool.
After the
That was just
bye, for some
that
reason
was
it
fluky.
just evaporated for like 6 weeks, and then it came back in the
Yeah.
fantasy playoffs, thankfully, but it was gone for like a full month and a half.
Yeah, he just needs like to improve his passing efficiency. Like if he keep, but like you want to see him take shots, you want to see them pass the ball a ton. And if he could run a little bit more or at least the same, and you just have more touchdown luck, all of a sudden you got someone who's at least knocking on the door of top 10. And, if I'm gonna get sniped on Jordan Love for a few dollars and I have to settle for Trevor Lawrence, that's perfectly fine.
There you go. All right. So those are your guys. A lot of them on your own team. Could pivot to the Broncos.
Yeah, let's do that.
You are
Hell yeah.
exceptionally high on the Broncos, and I've been getting some decent hate from my 8-win prediction on them.
Yeah. Oh, I
Where
think
do you
they're over
stand?
on wins. Their over on wins is a smash. I think it's like what set at like the Vegas total is like
I saw
what
some lines at five and a
5?
half. Yeah, 5.5. That
That's no. Sean Payton's not gonna let them win less than 6 games.
6 is a
That's not gonna
lock.
happen.
6 is so guaranteed.
Right.
There's a
Like
tough
it's
schedule
yeah.
at the very end of the season, like their last 4 games, I think are kind of difficult. But
Mhm.
even if they don't win that Bengals upset that I'm just calling
Mhm.
for the sake of fluke,
Yeah.
there's always random shit that happens. I wouldn't put it past Sean Payton to upset a
Yeah.
team like the Bengals, but I think 6 is guaranteed. 7 is probably
100%.
the safe number. But last year they were
Yeah.
8-9 with Russell Wilson, and I think by the time we hit week 6, week 7, there's going to be so many people that are acknowledging Bo Nix is a big upgrade over Russell Wilson. So
Yeah.
it's just a question
I
of,
my
do they miss Jerry Judy? I don't think so.
I don't think they will. Like he wasn't giving them a ton. He
No.
was hurt a lot. I think what's gonna happen is Bo Nix is gonna look super nice in this Sean Payton system, but he's gonna have a
Peyton
very low ceiling.
Peyton's going to make him look as best as
Yeah,
possible for a rookie. There's so much
yeah.
invested from not only like a draft capital standpoint, but like a whole organizational and like career standpoint.
Hmm.
Like Peyton is willing to eat 82 mil on Russ's contract by cutting
Yeah,
him. It, and he's tied to Denver for a long time. He
yeah.
wants to maintain his job and like not be miserable for fucking
100%.
another decade. Like there's so much invested in getting Bo
The main
Nix an
goal is to
efficient
show
start.
to everyone and say, see, it's Russ. See, it was Russ. It
Yeah,
wasn't me. It was Russ. And
yeah.
then if simultaneously Russ does bad with the Steelers, that's just going to hammer that home even more. Where it's like, oh, see, we're beating our win totals, and Russ sucks over in Pittsburgh.
That week 2 matchup at Denver versus Pittsburgh,
Yeah,
that is such an interesting game to me where that's why I'm so high on Fields, because I really see a window of opportunity for Russ to get benched as early as week 2. Like if
hmm,
they lose to Atlanta and he can't beat Bo Nix and it's like doesn't even look close, like
yeah,
they get the Chargers in their home opener week 3, and like the Chargers know some of his weaknesses. I think they win that game, but how long can you go just relying on defense with no excitement? Where, I
100%.
mean, Mike Tomlin said the other day, like, yeah, we still have a package for Fields. He's too athletic to not put him on the fucking, put him in the
Yeah, like
game. Like,
he's not like Zach Wilson in Denver where he's just going to sit on the sideline for the next few years. Like that's not going to happen.
if he has like 2 plays that lead to your like far more successful drives in the game, like
Hmm.
everyone's going to be clamoring to get Fields into the as the starter, just like by the time we hit week 3, if they go 0 and
Hmm.
2. So I'm
Hmm.
really interested to see what happens between the Steelers and the Broncos in that week 2 game. And I could see the Broncos like really shocking people.
And
Um,
so now you have him projected for 8 wins,
yeah,
Denver.
8.
They're going to do that somehow. They're going like
They're gonna find they beat
if
the
they win eight
Bills and the
games,
Chiefs last year.
if they're going to win 8 games, they're going to score points. Like that's going to happen. So someone has to do it. And I think I'm correct when I told you like the first Bronco to be drafted full stop is Javante in round 7. Like that's where he
Uh-huh.
goes in snake drafts on a 12-team ESPN league. That means if they're going to win 8 games, someone is outperforming their ADP. I don't know if it's going to be like the Texans, because my take is the Broncos are this year's Texans, where in the preseason we're saying this team is bullshit. We're not going to be like, no one's draftable. Don't take any Bronco. You like, this is an awful team. Avoid at all costs. And then in season, we're like, oh, no, there's actually some good players and they were steals at their ADP. I think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, Bo Nix is like CJ Stroud and he's the next coming of Peyton Manning. That's not going to happen. But it's going to be a team that really is slept on in the preseason and then outperforms their ADP. And someone's going to do it. I don't know who.
I think they'll outperform the ADP. Like there's going to be some that outperform the ADP. I just think to compare them to the Texans is like a reach, man. I'm not willing to. I'm not willing to go that far just because the Texans were so fucking elite. Like Nix is not Stroud, like you just said,
No.
but like they don't have anyone that even compares to like Nico Collins. Even you know what I
So
mean? Like
I think it's not going to be the receivers. I think if it's going to be one of them, it'll be through the running backs, specifically Javonte or Jaleel, I think is going to go off this year, mostly just because Sean Payton has a history of throwing to the running backs. Even last year with Russell Wilson, who doesn't throw to his running backs historically, they threw to the running backs at an incredibly
yeah,
high rate. You then add that with Bo Nix, who does not push the ball down the field. So that is perfect for running back dink and dunks, design running back throws. I think they're going to lead the NFL in terms of running back targets. And then for running backs, that just puts such a floor into your weekly point total. And then if you think that Denver as an offense is going to perform better, there are going to be touchdown opportunities. So I think it'll be through the running backs. That's why I like Estime too. I'm not out on Estime. I think if you can get one of them and just hope that you pick the right one, that was my take in best ball all off season is just get Denver running backs where I can because I look I don't know if it's going to be Javante or McLaughlin or Estime who's the one you want to have, but I think it's one of them.
I'm fading Javante. I think it's his last year there, and if he doesn't start off like red hot and keep it up through like the first 6 weeks, I think he's going to start to fade even more. Like, there's also some steam on Blake Watson. I know they cut Samaje Perine, but like, they brought in a fifth running back this offseason. Now they're down to four, and Estime has that goal line capability potential.
Mhm.
Jaleel looks really good out of the backfield as a pass catcher, and I did see this. I forget where. I'm not like pulling this stat out of my head based on research I did. I heard somebody else say it. I wish I could credit them. But as a team, collectively, the Broncos put up top 10 collective fantasy numbers from the running back position. The
Mhm.
problem is that they were just so spread around between three players that you weren't getting a startable, viable guy in your fantasy lineup. But as a team, they were heavily using the running back spot, and it's definitely going to continue being a focal point of their play calling. That's not
Mhm.
going to change. If anything, it just sets up Bo Nix for even more success by taking a
Mhm.
lot off of his plate and narrowing down like what he's actually asked to do. So I see a
Mhm.
very efficient team that also relies on running back. If Javante can prove me wrong, if he can really get back to the ceiling I saw for him a few years ago, then there is a world where he like does put up like top 20 numbers. He could offer you like a 10-point floor from like yards and catches every week, and then when he hits that touchdown, if they're high this season, you could be like extremely happy with what you get
Mhm.
from Javante. But I
And
just think
for
it's,
where he's going, that's amazing. Like to
yeah,
get
the
that kind of running back
the price
production.
is low for some solid upside, but I just think it's too
Mhm.
crowded. I still think that they incorporate all three, and I do genuinely believe that Estime is a big like vulture as the weeks go by. Once we hit like the second half of the season, I think Estime is gonna possibly see even more goal line touches than Javante, even if he's healthy. So with less
Mhm.
receiving work from Jaleel, McLaughlin also ran for like 5.4 yards per carry. He didn't get that many touches, but he was super efficient when he did get the rock. So yeah,
Mhm.
I like betting on Sean Payton collectively. Granted, I am not high on Cortland Sutton as a fantasy option.
Mhm.
I think you're going to get like a shock value from one of those other receivers that like
Mhm.
doesn't really impact your fantasy lineup too much. Like if you're only starting like two receivers in a flex, like it's going to be hard for somebody to
Mhm.
crack like the top 50 that's being drafted like Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin. Like that's probably not going to happen. Maybe Josh Reynolds
Mhm.
is their number two, but
Mhm.
like I do see Sutton taking a big dip back, and all that production has to go somewhere. Yeah, I just think they will be viable. There's just too many mouths to feed, and it's not going to be like so
Mhm.
focused into one player. That's why I'm just out on them. Other than maybe a decent like Bo Nix value in like a super flex format, just from like a floor
That
safety.
I actually do think is pretty great. Like if you full on in a super flex want to punt your second quarterback and just take bonus, I think he'll have the job all year if he doesn't get hurt,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
100%.
which honestly in a super flex is pretty valuable just to have someone that you know is going to be a starting caliber quarterback for your QB2,
Yeah,
like
if
for
I was in
sure.
super flex and I got like Jalen Hurts as my one, I'd be fine pivoting to just grab like Darnold and Nix at the
Hmm.
tail end and
Hmm.
just piece it together that way. But
For sure.
yeah, he's a good value in that format. I don't see him offering a lot of roster potential though in a one QB league.
Probably for bye weeks or injuries.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, I'm
yeah.
sure someone in some leagues are going to have to turn to Bo Nix at some point. If you're like, well, so and so's hurt, and it's also bye weeks, so
He'll
Bo
have a
Nix it is.
few spike weeks, a few matchups that you're like, oh okay, great spot for Knicks,
I
but
I guarantee you, there's going to be a week where you recommend people to pick up Bo Nix because
I would agree with that.
you're like, hey,
Yeah,
6 teams on a bye and so is hurt.
yeah,
You could do worse.
yeah. He'll crack the top 20 at least a couple times, but not consistently enough
You're
to
not
really move
thrilled.
the needle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're also high on the Chargers. I
Not to
mean,
make it a Chargers podcast because we're both fans. I just
yeah,
think that I think they're going to hit the over, like with the asterisks of Herbert's plantar fasciitis or whatever it is, like depending upon how serious that is or how much that
I think
impedes
he'll be
him.
okay.
Me too. But I think that's a smash over, mostly just because again, like I didn't realize they have a last place
Yeah,
schedule.
yeah.
Just sneakily that happened. And I think they're gonna have a pretty good path to overperforming there.
It's definitely an easy one. Like it starts off really easy. They can build some momentum against the Raiders and the Panthers, and then there are a few like tougher games, but honestly, like a lot of winnable ones. Like if they win week 3 against
Hmm.
the Steelers, that's gonna be fucking dope. Definitely a lock for
Hmm.
like at least 9 wins in that
I think
scenario.
nine, yeah,
I
for
think
sure. I think they could
9 is
easily hit nine.
pretty much guaranteed in my opinion. I'd be surprised if it was less than 8. Like that
Hmm.
feels very unrealistic. But 10, I talked myself into 10 um, a week or so ago, and
Hmm.
assuming the Jets, the Dolphins kind of disappoint. I mean, the Jets disappointing feels inevitable. The Dolphins though could definitely get back to 11 wins and keep us
Hmm.
out. But look at me saying us like I fucking play for them. Uh, no, keeping them out. But
Yeah.
yeah, their schedule has a lot of winnable games. It's
Hmm.
the Raiders, the Panthers on the road, the Steelers on the road, then the Chiefs in a bye. But then the Broncos, the Cardinals on the road, the Saints game, that's going to be a win at
Hmm.
Cleveland versus Tennessee. I think is like there's some upset potential where the Titans could definitely beat them, but it's at home,
Hmm.
and I think it's like obviously such a key game for them to win that Harbaugh will like really put an emphasis on getting it done.
Yeah,
I was
for
previously
sure.
like this will be the game that keeps us out, but now I think we that they can beat it. They can
Yeah,
beat the Titans. And then
for
versus
sure.
the Bengals and the Ravens, that's going to be really rough, but then they get the Falcons, another game against the Chiefs, and then the last
Hmm.
4 games like they could finish 4-0 to close it out. They got Tampa, Denver, the Patriots, and then the Raiders again. Like
Yeah,
they could start off
especially if
3-0, and then they could also finish with 4 straight wins. That's 7 right there with
yeah.
some definite winnable games in the middle.
Especially with those last ones, they're going to know whether they're in the playoff hunt or not. So there's going to be a heightened
Yeah.
sense of, hey, we gotta let's lock this
Yeah,
up.
but that's also the case for just about every team
For sure.
most of the time. But yeah, Patriots win, that's a lock. They'll probably sweep the Raiders and at
Hmm.
least split with Denver. So,
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of wins that wouldn't have happened if Staley was still the coach. Like they'd probably
Oh
still
yeah.
be like a 5-6 win team if Staley was there, but obviously that's not the case.
A lot less fourth down attempts in our own end zone or at our own 20. So excited for that.
Yeah, a lot more second
Um,
and second and threes. than second and 12.
For sure. A team I'm low on and would bet the under on are the Eagles, because I still have not heard a good explanation from anyone how they have fixed the problem from the end of last season. Like the end of last season, they were one of the worst teams in the NFL with a bottom five defense. And there hasn't been a really good explanation I've heard that has convinced me, oh, that's fixed. And we're back to Super Bowl caliber Eagles.
There's
And
their
yeah.
secondary is still rough, but they did address it in the draft. There's some very good potential with their rookie secondary picks. I believe Nate
Yeah,
Wiggins and
DeJean,
Cooper
right?
DeJean.
Like
Yeah, Cooper DeJean.
he's not
I think those are the
getting
two.
good. He's not getting good reviews thus far, DeJean, which is what I'm kind of like concerned about is he's not coming out and being like Sauce Gardner or anything near that where you're like, oh shit, here we go,
Well,
lockdown.
they don't need to be elite though. You know what I mean? Like, they just have to be a little bit better to completely like remove that back end. Like they were just so atrocious. And
Well,
James Bradbury is now already hurt, which maybe helps them. He was terrible last season. He's already moved over to safety.
yeah,
But like they're
I
still a team that can win shootouts. You know, like that's the thing.
I get it. And my concern, like several Eagles players went off the record and were asked like what was this? Like what caused this? And they all cited that like one of the top things was just a disconnect between coaches and players, specifically between like Sirianni and Hurts. Like that was just the consistent thing was like they couldn't be in a room together apparently. That's insane that I've said
Yeah.
this before, where it's like that's just an insane thing that the head coach and the starting quarterback couldn't be in a room together because they couldn't get on the same page. I know you said you think Sirianni will get fired. I think so too. I'm just like that's a weird vibe. It's a weird vibe to start a season with. It's a weird vibe. And then like even Hurts is like, oh yeah, 90% of the offense is different. And I'm like, okay, there's gonna be some growing pains there. I'm still 50-50 on whether Kellen Moore is actually good. Dallas certainly did
I
better
think he's
without
good.
him.
I mean, I don't know if he's like elite, but I think he's far better than who they had last year. I wouldn't put him on the same
Mhm.
caliber as Shane Steichen 2 years ago, but I do think he's a big upgrade. Like he'll get the most out of the pieces that they have, and they'll definitely like the Chargers fell apart from like health, but they were
Mhm.
still like really good at scoring in the first like 2 months of the season while Herbert was healthy. And
Mhm.
Keenan was 31 years old and like kind of injury prone, like definitely on the back nine of his career. Meanwhile, now they have AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. Last year, Mike Williams only played like 3 games, so there's a lot of
Mhm.
weapons, some potential. I know you're low on Saquon Barkley, but that's
Yeah.
still like
He
a
went
big.
for way too much in the draft. That was insane. What was it, like 50 something?
I mean, you're gonna be outraged no matter what. But yeah, Saquon was tied with Garrett Wilson at $50, same price.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if I'm wrong on that, I will happily like eat that and come out here and say I was wrong. Like I'm not gonna dance around it, but
That is
I think
something that made me
that's
really
insane.
ecstatic about my. I got Jameer Gibbs for 46, and Jonathan
Oh
Taylor
yeah,
also
that's
went for
fine.
52. So like, yeah,
That's fine.
in that context, I'm like really happy about that. I got Pacheco for 44. Kyron Williams went for 45. ETN also for 45. But yeah, I'm still higher on him than you. I feel really confident I'm gonna win that $20 bet that we made. But
Yeah.
uh,
No, I'm
I
I'm
I
I I'm
also
excited for that.
I also just want to bring up. I'm pretty sure their defensive coordinator last year was Matt Patricia. This year it's Vic Fangio. Like
I mean,
that's another
Miami's defense
factor.
last year wasn't all that great. Like I'm not sitting here thinking
No,
I'm
but
not super sold on Vic Fangio either. I was like, oh yeah, here that'll fix. I guess my whole thing is I haven't seen anything that has made me truly feel, ah, that fixed it. And now they're back to elite status. I could be
well,
wrong. I for sure could be wrong. And like if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That Philly's actually going to underperform this year.
I have him
But
at 12 wins. I could see 10 as a possibility. I have him on like a heater at the end of the season, but
yeah,
I don't see a world where they don't win the division because it's been 20 years since it's had a repeat champ. And like,
so
are you telling
that's
me
a
the
thing.
Cowboys win the division? Because to put the
Yes.
Commanders at the top of the
No, it's
division,
the Cowboys.
you think it's the
Yeah,
Cowboys? You,
no,
you think they win another
yes.
12 wins in their fourth straight year?
I
is
think
that
the
it?
Cowboys, I think they're currently at 9.5. I think they're gonna overperform that. I think, yeah, the Cowboys win the division this year.
I don't
The
think
the
so.
this is the so the two things that people bring up are Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season,
That's
and
going to
no
change
one's
this year.
ever and no one's ever repeated as champs in that division. Those types of arguments I've never liked because it's like until it does. Like until it happens.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping that from happening.
Well,
It's just in a way happenstance that that's occurred.
I'm only
Like
betting on
all
one
like
of those to change, not both.
right. There's no law of nature that is making Mike Tomlin not have a like everyone says that and then just he's gonna have a losing season. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that's not a golden rule. And then oh no one's ever repeated in 20 years. Okay, until they do.
Well, for
And
me,
then that just happens.
it's just a combination of defensive coordinator changes. Like the Eagles swap out Patricia for Fangio. Yeah, maybe Fangio's not like elite, but he has had some really successful seasons in the past. I think he is a big upgrade over Matt Patricia. And then with the
Mhm.
Cowboys, you're losing Dan Quinn and replacing him with Mike Zimmer, who's been really outdated the last time we saw him in the league, where
Mhm.
his he used to be known for defense when he had like a really good Vikings team, and then he faded for a while, and he had terrible offenses with the Vikings. And I just don't see him moving the needle very much on a defense that also lost Duron Bland to injury recently. He's going to miss like 6-8 weeks. That's big. If they're not getting, 3 turnovers a game, that is a
Mhm.
huge swing that limits the Cowboys' upside. I also I'll bring it up here. I'll show it on the screen, but I'll show you the Cowboys schedule where like we all know notoriously the Cowboys win a ton of home games. Like they dominate the
Mhm.
home games, they dominate in division, and they're pretty much 500 on the road against like viable teams. They're not great against like real playoff caliber teams. They just own
Mhm.
everyone that's shit in their conference, and then they have this massive home field advantage. But they do not catch a break in terms of home matchups. Like they get a home game against the Baltimore Ravens, against the Detroit Lions, against the Eagles, obviously, but also against the Texans, against the Bengals, and the last two are against Tampa and Washington. Like, there's 5 home games that are against like really, really good teams. Most of them in the AFC, like the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Texans. That is not going to work out for them. Where they're like finishing the year 7-1 at home. I just don't see that happening. So that's one big reason why I'm taking a step back on them. And then we
Mhm.
all know they can't beat the fucking Niners. That's an automatic L. And I just think
Yeah.
Washington is going to give them a real run for their money. I could definitely be wrong that Washington doesn't sweep them, but I don't see a world where they sweep both the Eagles and the Commanders. Like, yeah, obviously they'll
Mhm.
sweep the Giants, but like they will not go 5-1 in division. There's no way they go 6-0. And I think like best case scenario they're 4-2, but I really think they're going to be 3-3. I don't think they have that big advantage that they historically have. I really see
Mhm.
a come down for them with downgrades to the defense and the coaching.
And I guess for me, I view my concerns with I like all of that's true. I just think that for me at least, my concerns with the Eagles are greater than my concerns for the Cowboys. Um,
That's fair.
just because like with the Eagles, it was a full-on offensive and defensive kind of collapse. Like they couldn't get anything going on either side of the ball. And again, I just have a lot more faith in Dak and CD. Like I think that's just an elite combination. So
Yeah, but that other
yeah,
than Ferguson, they have
that's
nobody else. Like at least with the Eagles, like the offense is like an all-star caliber roster. Like you have weapons everywhere.
yeah. I'm a bit, I guess, in terms of an NFL quarterback, just iffy on Jalen Hurts.
Okay.
I'm not sure he's like his best year was the Super Bowl year, and he hasn't really been able to do close to that. I'm not talking about for I mean for
He
fantasy, he's great because he's gonna get all the rushing
Yeah,
touchdowns.
that's
I mean
different.
more for like that's different. I mean more for winning games and not turning the ball
No,
over. Like he turned the ball over a ton last
he's
year.
still unproven in that
Um,
regard. Yeah.
yeah. So that's I guess my war, like if the question is Jalen, like what is Jalen Hurts? Is he the Super Bowl year or is he these other years we've had? I think he's more likely the other years we've had. And at that point, he might not be enough to kind of carry them
Well, he
to
did get
winning.
banged up last year a little bit,
Mhm,
and I think if he stays healthy, I think he's going to be somewhere in between of what he was the last
mhm.
two seasons, and that's why I'm picking them to win the division. I
I
I,
get it.
I think he's I don't know if he's as good as that Super Bowl season. I think that was definitely like his ceiling type of
Mhm,
performance, but I do think last year was a little bit worse than what he's probably going to average out to be over the
mhm,
next handful of seasons. Like 5 years from now, I think last year will look like a down year overall
mhm,
on average. But well, that
mhm,
could be better than what we see from him again. It's possible
mhm.
that he never relives that potential. But we'll find out. We will find
We'll
out.
find out. I'm
Um,
excited for that for sure.
you also brought up the Bears over and the Vikings
Oh
under.
yeah.
So do you think the Bears win 10 plus games, or
Yeah.
I have them at 9,
I
10,
think they
10
get
plus?
I think they get 10. I think they get 10.
Okay,
I do
10.
think they get 10. Yeah. Mostly just because like if you look at their schedule, I'm a Caleb believer. So like first off, like that's just kind of the starting point is
You
that you
are
gotta
a
you
USC Trojan fan as well, just for context.
100%, but I also just even apart from that, like I remember seeing him at Oklahoma and being like, "Oh, this guy's good. Like
Yeah,
he's very good."
yeah.
So I'm a Caleb believer. They have like some, I think for the most part, their early season schedule, there aren't a ton of defenses that I look at and are terrifying.
First 10
Like,
weeks, those first 9 games, including the bye, there's a world where they're like 6-3.
but like the big thing with me making like I'm not saying they're going to win all those games. It's more he's going to be able to knock the cobwebs off against defenses that aren't like top tier defenses. Like some of them are going to be good, some of those games they're going to lose, but he's going to be able to kind of hone his skills for like half the season basically and just kind of get the reps in and improve such that later like if the schedule was reversed, I'd be a little nervous just because then you're like, "Oh, you might get your ass kicked for the beginning part of the year, and who knows what that's going to do to your confidence." This way,
Yeah,
he gets to practice a fair amount. He's got some difficult games later in the year. Don't get me wrong. Like
he's
he
got the
faces the like,
Texans week 2. He's got the Rams week 4. He's got the Jags in London after the. I think the Jags are already staying in London for that game. I might be wrong, but
but like
Jags in
those
London
are
not
like
not ideal.
they might lose. I'm not saying they're going to win those games, but the Jags do not have you're not like, oh, the Jags defense, you got to worry about that. It's not like, oh, the Texans defense, that's a top five defense right there. It's not the Niners who they play later. Like these aren't teams that have defenses where you're like, oh shit, like here come the Ravens or like here come the Niners, like even the Browns. Like it's not those teams where you're like, oh
Yeah,
boy, here come these like lockdown defenses, and they're even like when do they play? Do they play the Patriots? Yeah,
yeah.
like
Week 10,
he
they play the
one, two, three,
Patriots.
four. He gets 6 games before he has to play the Patriots, who are notoriously like a good defense. My point is more he's going to get reps against defenses that, while maybe good, are not elite, and I think that'll help them come away with 10 wins this year. That's the thesis of what
It's
I'm
it's
saying.
possible. I think 9 is kind of like the ceiling, personally,
Hmm.
but I still see a winning record. I have them as a playoff team. I think they do make the wild
Yep,
card, but
me too.
it's just a question of how are they gonna do in division. Like the end of the
Hmm.
schedule really is the deciding factor because all of those division
For
games are
sure,
backloaded starting week 11, and it's also added with a Niners and a Seahawks matchup. The Seahawks game they
for
should
sure.
win. They can sweep the Vikings. That's possible, but they
Hmm.
they could easily get swept by both the Lions and the Packers. There's a world where they go
100%.
like 1-5 in division.
So the end of the year is going to matter a ton for them, and
Yeah.
it's just and again, my comment is hope if he is as good as I think he is, he'll hopefully be like he'll have many NFL games under his belt at that point, and will have learned a lot, and will be set up as best as he can be to come away with 10 through that gauntlet at the end of the year.
Well, let's hope for the best. I would love to see them in the playoffs. I think that'd be a much more
Yeah.
interesting situation. It's also like who who can you really get excited about making the
Hmm.
playoffs in the NFC? Like, uh, maybe I'm wrong about the Cowboys, and then if the Eagles don't fall apart, then like there aren't really any opportunities for any new like real
Hmm.
playoff teams other than like the Falcons. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of just that would be disappointing if like every
Hmm.
single playoff team from last year in the NFC other than Tampa is back in it. Like,
Yeah.
give me
100%.
something new to root for. I want some excitement, and
100%.
that's why I'm choosing the Bears. But it could possibly be like the Seahawks who make that 7 seed. It could possibly
Hmm.
be like, Jaden Daniels could shock the world. I
For
don't
sure.
I don't think he'll have a winning season, but I do think he's going to come close, and
Yeah.
they could be the 7 seed. It is possible. They also have a matchup in week 8 between the two teams. That game could be a deciding factor for the wild card. It's possible.
Yeah, my big concern with like I'm a huge Jane Daniels fan. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in fantasy, but my concern is they went and got Cliff Kingsbury, who at least in his NFL career has always been dead last in pre-snap motion. And that is that's the modern NFL is incorporating pre-snap
Yeah,
motion. And like the best offenses all do it at the highest rate. It's like Kansas City, San Francisco,
the
Miami,
Rams.
like
Yeah,
the Rams, they all do pre-snap motion and it improves offensive efficiency a ton. Like it's proven to work, and he just won't do it. He does it the last in the league every year. So unless he has changed his philosophy and is now going to do it at league average, that makes me a little nervous just in terms of the Commanders' offense. That it's like, oh, cool, you're still running an offense from a decade ago, and no one else is doing that anymore.
yeah.
You're ignoring that stuff,
He can
right?
incorporate like running quarterbacks, but ideally he's trying to run the air raid, and they don't have four weapons
Yeah.
to throw out there on a per play basis. Like it's
So
Terry
that's
and
my
maybe
concern.
maybe two other guys that you're like really hoping work out, but
Hmm.
like one of them would be Eckler and the other one would be like the rookie tight end. So like
Yeah.
yeah, I do worry a little bit about their like ceiling. It
Plus, they
because
have
now
I think it's a
Dotson's a
bottom
complete
five.
nothing.
Yeah. If they have a bottom five offensive line, something like that. I think it's like one of the
It's
worst ranked
bad.
offensive
It's
lines.
bad.
It's like a third round. What is their left tackle? He's like a third round draft pick rookie, like with that no one cares. Like, so that's what makes me nervous about Washington. I think Jaden Daniels could overcome all of that 100%. But those two things, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a little
I
scary
mean,
for
they
sure.
had the
And
number
it,
2 pick. They were the second worst team in the league for many reasons last season.
yeah.
It's not a guarantee that they all of a sudden improve dramatically. They could be a
Mhm.
5-win team. So
Yeah.
we'll see about them. But they're other than the Cowboys, I don't see any
Yeah.
other team other than it's either that 7 seed is either the Cowboys, the Bears, or the Seahawks. I think those are the only three teams in the NFC that I think can actually compete for it, and that's
Hmm.
my assumption that the Eagles
Hmm.
win their division. But if the Eagles drop off, then I don't think the Eagles would fall to below 9 wins. Like
Yeah, for
th-
sure.
that, maybe they don't win the division, but to be a losing team next season would shock me. Hurts would have to go
Mhm.
down.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then the Vikings one we could just touch on quickly. I'm just like, I don't know. Like I really believe in Kevin O'Connell. I mean, I have Justin Jefferson now, so I've got to be a Vikings fan, right? Like that's how that works. But that their win total makes me nervous. What is it by Vegas? It's like 7.5.
Oh, really?
Yeah, isn't it? Or six and a
I
half?
thought it was six and a
Oh,
half.
6.5, excuse me. Yeah.
Um,
7 wins, I feel I'd probably bet the under for that.
let me check. I'm pretty sure it's 6.5, but let's just verify. Vikings. They're near the bottom. Um, I mean, FanDuel has 7.5 actually, but
Yeah, I'd take the under.
Caesar Sportsbook has 6.5. So
I don't think they're getting 8 is I guess
no,
my
there's no way
point.
they get to 8. I think 7 is the cap, and that's like optimistic about Darnold. I've dropped him down to 6, so I would take the under on both numbers. But yeah, if you can get that seven and
Yeah.
a half, that's a lock to hit under.
I am feeling more bullish on Jefferson, mostly just because Nick Mullins is now the backup, and we at least had a very limited and small sample of Nick Mullins throwing the ball to Justin Jefferson 12 times. Like he's not good, but it's like we at least have a proof
No,
of concept that when they put Nick Mullins in, Kevin O'Connell still threw the ball a ton, and they threw the ball to Justin Jefferson 12 times. So I'm like, all
yeah,
right, that's a floor.
and part of
Like,
that is because Nick Mullins also threw like 8 interceptions in 3 games,
oh yeah, no, he's
and
bad.
and
He's for sure
now
bad.
the,
Like,
you're on the field and you're moving the ball down, you're getting cheap yards, and then next thing you know, you're back on the field 30 seconds later and you've moved back 50 yards to the 25 and you got to make up that ground again
oh
with
yeah.
less time on the clock, and now you're also trailing, and yeah, just more incentive to keep chucking it. So that's why Nick
hmm
Mullins in his 3 starts last year averaged 380 passing yards per game.
hmm
But
Yeah,
those
love
interceptions
it.
just atrocious, not viable to compete. But here we'll
Yeah.
we'll just play real quick, like not like
Mhm.
a lot of long-winded, not a long-winded answer.
Mhm.
But we'll just run through like Niners over under 11 and a half. I would hit the under.
I do under.
Chiefs 11 and a half. I'd hit the over.
Over for sure. Yeah.
Eagles 10 and a half. I'm on the over. Sounds like
I'm
you're on the
under.
under. Ravens
Mhm.
10 and a half. I would hit the over.
I'll do over. I think they're going to be good. I think Lamar, like I mean, we're not doing long-winded, but Lamar is great. He seems great
Didn't
and
they
like
win
committed to this year.
14 last year, or
Yeah, I
like
think I know they lost some pieces on the offensive line and defense. I still think they're a good team.
yeah,
So,
I think 11 is the floor for sure.
mhm.
Lions 10 and a half. I'll smash the over there.
God, uh, I will do over. I
Bills,
hesitated because their defense is bad, and I mean like that. Like a big
they
reason why the
got a lot
Lions are
better on
good.
defense last year.
Like the Lions get into a lot of shootouts is the thing, and that's why they're good for fantasy because like they have a great offense and get into shootouts. So,
Well,
we'll see.
my thing on that being so confident is like they need to win at least 12 to even like sniff a tiebreaker with the Packers this
hmm
year. And like if they don't hit 13, then like I
Oh,
don't think they have a shot. So I do see them smashing double digit
mhm.
wins. But Bills 10 and a half. This one's tricky. I would not want to bet this one, honestly.
I do under. I just like there's a lot of
Under,
faith in
okay.
Josh Allen. There's a lot of faith in Josh Allen. I just could see it being bad for him
I have
if they
them at
just be a
11
bad team.
wins, but yeah, I think they could easily do 10. I think that's a very sharp line that I'd rather just not bet at all.
hmm
But I just if you can get the Caesar Sportsbook line of 9.5, I'll hit the over for sure. But on
hmm
FanDuel at 10.5, I'd rather just stay away.
Yeah.
Bengals 10 and a
hmm
half, I'll take over.
I'll take under.
Under, interesting.
I'll take under. I'm really like all that stuff that I like about T. Higgins. I am nervous about the Joe Burrow hand thing. I know they're saying it's
Interesting.
fine. I know they're saying it's fine. We've just never we've never had a quarterback with this injury on his throwing hand before, so it's really uncharted territory. I think, and with how injured Joe Burrow gets, I feel like that's more a bet that he's gonna do what he's done every year and not stay
It's
healthy. So that's
possible,
all. I
but
think the team's great. I'm just worried about injuries. So I think that's a safe
okay.
under.
We differ there, but Cowboys 9.5. I will hit the under.
I'm over.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I, I,
Um,
I think they're getting 10.
we already hammered that point, but yeah, I'll differ there. Dolphins 9.5. I've dropped them down to 9 wins, so
I'm under.
you're under as well. Are you
Yeah,
like
their
a losing
defense got a
season, or are you just like
no,
nine and eight as well?
they just lost a lot of people on defense. They really
Yeah,
did.
Christian Wilkins is a big loss.
So I think their defense is gonna be like a sieve and just let people run through them. And so then they're gonna have to make up for it on offense, and sometimes they won't be able to.
If they lose a Tyreek Hill for like a month,
Yeah.
or if
He's
Mostert
30 and
goes
injured
down
now.
and A
So
Chain also misses a month, like There's a universe where they get really injured really quick.
Yeah.
But okay,
Mhm.
so well, I'd rather of just avoid that line entirely. If I stick to
Mhm.
my bets, I'd go under on Dolphins. But
Mhm.
Jets 9.5. I'll take the under.
Man, it's like close for me.
Yeah, it's either 9 or 10.
I'm gonna say over just because I have two Jets and I wanna I wanna will that into existence.
Well, if you're giving them the over,
It's
then they're in the
close.
playoffs, and that means either the Chargers or my Colts pick doesn't work out. So,
Yeah,
you sounds like you're betting that the
I'll
Jets
do
are a
over.
playoff team. Okay.
Yeah, I'll do over.
Falcons nine and a
I'll
half. I'm
leave.
smashing the over on Falcons nine and a
Yeah,
half.
that's an over for sure.
Texans nine and a
Yeah,
half. I think this is the easiest bet of
yeah, I'm
over.
doing over.
hundred
Yeah.
percent over on 9.5 for the Texans.
Mm.
Same goes for me on the Packers. I think those two are just like automatic
Mm.
money in the
What's
bank
what are the
overs.
Packers? What
Not
is it?
9.5.
I'll do under.
Really?
Yeah,
Holy! I'll bet
yeah,
you right now. Like I'll even do
yeah.
I'll even
Sure.
do 10, man.
Yeah. So like you're under 10. Is that what it is? Well, wait, what? Isn't that the same as 9.5?
I guess I would do 10.5, but
Yeah, I was gonna say.
so
I was like, that's the same offer. Wait a second.
okay, so you're saying they win 9 games, and I'm saying I think they win at least 12. I think they could win 13, potentially 14, honestly. I will smash the over on 10 wins.
Uh, yeah, I'll take the under on that for
Okay,
sure.
so add that to
Yeah,
our Kenneth Walker Saquon
yeah,
bet. Bears 8.5 sounds like you're on the over. I would be
I'm
on
on the
that
over
too.
for sure.
Colts at 8.5, I would smash the over.
Yeah, I'll take over on that.
Maybe not 10, but I think 9 is guaranteed.
Yeah, I think they can get 9. I'm not super, that one I'm not super confident about.
I feel pretty
I,
confident
I
about
think
it, but
I think
I
if
understand.
Richardson gets hurt, it's that Richardson could get hurt again,
They
and I'm
have
like,
they won 9 games with Minshew. They got Flacco now. I still see them in. They got
yeah, we'll see.
Leatu Latu in the first round as well. Like I really like the Colts, bro. But
Yeah.
I could see myself being on an island in that call in terms of that call.
Mhm.
But Browns 8.5. That one I don't want to bet at all.
Yeah, man.
I
I think they're in a really bad way with quarterback. They just got rid of Huntley today. He went back to the Ravens.
eh. They have
But
Winston.
it but I don't think Jameis is good.
Oh
I don't
yeah,
think
but
Jameis
Huntley
would.
Huntley sucks too. So
But Jameis, I know, doesn't win football games is the problem. And I think Deshaun Watson's going to not play for most of the year is the problem. I think just they have a really red flag at the quarterback position. So I'd take the under.
yeah, same.
If I'm betting one, I'd take the under.
Me too.
Yeah. They have a
Ram.
great defense, but
This feels like an automatic over, but Rams 8.5
yeah, I trust Sean. I think Sean McVay is easy a top 5 coach in the NFL.
at
Um,
worst. Yeah.
Easily that. So when you have that, and Stafford, when healthy, is like a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. So you've got
hmm
that. Yeah, I take the over.
Steelers 8.5. I'll take the under.
Under for sure. That looks like a garbage fire. That looks like an absolute garbage
Yeah,
fire.
their defense can will them to 8 wins, I think, but Russ is a losing quarterback at this point, and Fields has always been a losing quarterback. So yeah, 8 is their
Yeah.
ceiling, I think, this year.
hmm
Jaguars 8.5. This one I'd rather just not bet.
I'll do the over. Yeah, I'll take over.
I have over as well, but I have them at 9, and I don't feel like
hmm
ecstatic about it.
hmm
Chargers 8.5. I'll go over.
That's an over. With the schedule that they have, I'd take the over. I
Yeah,
think they could get
I,
it to
I
9. I
think
don't know
I think
about
9.
10, but yeah.
10 might not happen, but 9 should. Cardinals
hmm
7.5. If you asked me a month ago, I would have taken the over. Now I'll take the under.
I'm gonna take the under for sure. Yeah.
Bucks 7.5. I will just barely take the over, but I don't feel good about it.
I just think like we've seen two different versions of Baker where like he could ball out and then also where he then regresses to like not a great quarterback. I think we could have that season, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
take the under.
Seahawks 7.5. I'll take the under.
Over.
You go
I'm
over on
doing over.
Seahawks.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a surprisingly good team. I just buy into
So
the offense that they're implementing.
so you think 9
At
wins
least
or
eight. At least eight.
at least 8? Okay, I'll take the
Yeah.
under on Seahawks, but I don't feel exceptional about that call.
Hmm.
I would not want to do that as a bet. I'll put it that way. Um, Saints 7.5. I am hammering the under. Oh my god.
Yeah, I think this is just a garbage organization, so I'm going to do under. Like, you could bring in all the coaches you want. I think every coach there knows it's like a lame duck year, and I don't know, man.
I don't see more than
I'm doing
4
under.
wins for them, but I literally
Yeah,
dropped them down to 2, and I've taken a lot of slack about it in the comments, but I don't give a shit.
I'm doing under on Saints for sure.
That
I think it could just, the offense could be so bad.
well, you
It could
know,
just be,
Davis Allen's getting fired, and if that happens mid-season, it's because they go like 2-7,
yeah.
and there's no world they win 8 games. I know they were 9-8 last year, but there's no
No,
fucking chance with that O line. And if
no.
there's any injury to just one of Kamara or Olave, they
Mhm.
are fucked. So,
And I just don't think Carr is good. So
no,
yeah.
terrible team this year. Like,
Mhm.
I don't understand why people are that upset. Like, yeah, you probably like root for your team, but like, wouldn't you want them to just have a better draft pick if they're gonna have like a
Mhm.
losing season in the first place and have no shot at the playoffs? But
100%.
people people are really upset. I
Yeah.
put them at 2 wins, and I'm gonna hold strong. I almost want to drop them to 1 just to double down, but
Yes.
um,
They just don't. They have zero. They never play a game.
they're the Lions of like
Yeah.
'08 or whatever, whenever that happened.
Yeah.
Vikings 7.5 sounds like we're both under.
Yeah.
Giants 6.5. I'll take the under.
Gotta be under for
Raiders,
sure.
yeah, no way, no way.
Raiders under.
Yeah, 6.5. That feels like
Under.
6 feels like their ceiling. Commanders 6.5. I'll go over.
I'll do under.
Okay. Do you want to bet
Yeah.
on that one? Because I'd be. I think
No,
they
I'm
win
not
8.
confident about it.
Okay.
I don't I think there's every chance that Jaden could rise above and do it, but I'm more like the Lion and Cliff Kingsbury where I'm like, so that's I'm not confident enough to bet on that.
Okay.
I'm gonna take the under
Titans 6.5. I'm gonna go under, but I don't feel like
though. Vice.
insanely good about it.
That feels right there. I don't know if they're gonna get seven, so I'll do under. I think Levis is bad. He's kind of unproven, but I think it could just be a bad offense
I
and
think
some
they could
good.
sneak into 7. I have them projected for 4, but that's only
Hmm.
because I took away that Chargers win. So I think 5 is probably a safer bet, but like
Hmm.
especially with these kickoff rules, like there's gonna be some weird ass fucking swings.
Yeah. So
Um,
I'd do under if I had to.
okay. Panthers 5.5. This one's really tempting to hit the over, honestly.
I'm doing over
Yeah,
personally. Yeah. I think they're gonna figure out a way to do it to get six.
I have them at 5, but I kind of want to give them 6.
I'm
Um,
gonna do six
okay,
because I'll believe in Deontay and yeah, I'll do six.
okay. And then Broncos 5.5. You're smashing the over, so am I.
Over.
And then lastly, the Patriots 4.5. I'll take the under.
Under. Good
Yeah.
God. I think they could be the worst team in football
It's
easily.
the number one pick next season is either going to the Patriots, the Giants, or the Saints, in my opinion.
Yeah.
One of those
I
three.
so we're about to run out of time here, but
But
so here we
it's
could
probably a good time to call it. We're at an
yeah.
hour and 42.
Yeah, for sure. I personally so apparently the Giants were calling the Patriots to get
Drake
Drake
May.
May.
Yeah.
I think they should have done it and asked for like New York's pick this year and New York's pick next year because you'd look at it and say, all right, we're probably going to get the first overall pick next year, if not be in contention for it. The
Hmm.
Giants are probably going to be in contention for it next year as well. So that means you get a foundational piece. I think it could have been Joe Alt. You could have gotten Neighbors or whatever. You could have gotten a great piece this year and then had two top four picks next year where then you can get your quarterback and yet another foundational piece.
So I think if the GM had had full reign of the draft decision, that's what would have happened. They would have traded out of 3 and they would have gotten a
Hmm.
haul because it would have been the better decision in the long run and they would have just rolled
Hmm.
with Jacoby. But I think because they just fired Belichick and Robert Kraft has this like personal vendetta on the situation
Hmm.
and is like bitter about not getting that much credit. Like, it, did you? I didn't watch it. I don't have Apple TV. But did you hear anything about that documentary about the Patriots
No, he
dynasty?
like made it. And
Yeah,
apparently it's just like a giant Robert Kraft suckfest and not really representative of what happened. And
it
like, yeah.
it reframes it as not Belichick and Brady, but those three guys. Like that
Yeah.
Kraft was this big, and yeah, he made sure that Garoppolo didn't take over, but like he's not doing jack fucking shit.
It
Like,
made it seem like it was such an attempt to like grab the narrative by him. But I don't
yeah,
think the majority of people even believe that.
I
Like,
mean, maybe a few people, but like in general, especially with like this media tour that Belichick's about to go on and like kind of rehash some of his like, good graces and fan base. Like I definitely
mhm,
think it's pivots back in favor of Belichick, but like I think there's 100% a like conversation in Kraft's mind where it's like I can't go into the season with nothing to be excited about. Like
yeah.
everyone's gonna fucking hate me if I
Hmm.
didn't re-sign Brady a few years ago. He goes to the Bucks and wins a championship, and then I
Yeah.
get rid of Belichick, who kind of sabotaged the whole thing himself. Like I'm not saying Belichick is this saint. Belichick has his problems.
No.
I think he deserved
Yeah.
to lose his job, but just from like how do you manage this for PR? Like we have nothing, no
Hmm.
shred of hope at all, and we're just completely punting a year. He's
Hmm.
old. He doesn't want to have to deal with that. So I think he made the call as like, no, we're taking this quarterback, and it's my fucking say. And like
Yeah.
I don't I don't
100%.
I don't think he like gave them the title of GM until
Yeah.
after the draft. Like it was like still kind of like you're an assistant type of situation.
Hmm.
So that's why I think it didn't happen. But I agree. I think long term it would have benefited them more to trade it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So they're fucked.
Yeah, they're going to be just an absolute dumpster fire next year. Easily probably getting the number one overall pick. I think Carolina's going to be better than them for sure. I really can't think of a team that just seems as bad as them.
I think Drake May could have like a Sam Darnold type of career where it's just
Hmm.
terrible for a while, even though he has potential, and like until he moves to another spot where he actually has like a opportunity to succeed, everyone's just gonna shit on him and no one's gonna like believe in him. But he has like legit talent. He's just so unpolished as of today that he's not ready to lead them to any
Hmm.
like viable wins. So it's a bummer. Just a rough spot for him.
Yeah, so Darnold is 27, and what was it? You know that former Green Bay Packers quarterback, he plays a ton of Madden and talks about
I,
uh
I I know who you're talking about. I can't name him off the top of my
um
head, but I've seen his channel. Yeah, he plays Madden a lot.
he talked about Darnold in one of his videos. Kurt Benkert
Yes, I
is his
wanted to
name.
say Kurt Metzger, but that's a comedian. uh,
He talked about Darnold where he was essentially like, look, Darnold came into the league incredibly young, was put in a position where he was forced to save a franchise that had been historically bad and couldn't do it. And his stance was more like quarterback primes are kind of like 25 to 30, like that range, or like even 26 to 30. And Darnold's 27 now, which means he's only now kind of in his prime. But he's been in the league forever just because he got drafted so young. And so you're hoping that this is actually the best version of Sam Darnold, who now doesn't have the weight of saving a franchise on his shoulders, who has had the ability to learn from different NFL coaches. And this is kind of also about Trevor Lawrence. Like Trevor Lawrence, how old is he? He's younger than that.
I think you said he
Um,
was 25,
He's 24. So Trevor Lawrence
24.
is 24, almost about to be 25. That's young. Like I know he's been in
Yeah,
the NFL a while, but like he's still like these quarterbacks are still improving. Yeah, Mahomes didn't need to do that. Yeah, Burrow didn't need to do that for sure. But like, like Mahomes is 28, isn't he?
yeah, he's closer to 30 than he's been in the league for a
Yeah,
while now, like
he's been in the league for a while, but
6 years.
Mahomes is 28. He'll be 29 in September. So he is in that prime where it's like, okay, cool. Like Yeah, he's just older than these guys for sure.
Darnold has one last shot. If it doesn't happen this year, it's never going to happen. But I could see him getting a $35 million contract next year if he really outperforms what we expect with the Vikings. And
For someone
it's
who
possible.
needs him, like
It's
there's going to be a team
unlikely,
somewhere that might need him.
but for fantasy, I think he'll be top 25. Anyways, we're
Yeah,
running a little long, so probably
mhm.
good to call it. But it's
Yeah,
been fun,
let's
man.
do it. Yeah, excited for the season.
Yeah, excited for that Packers bet.
I know that'll be a good. We're racking them up. Like I wonder if we're 2 bets in the preseason. We'll see where we get, and then
Yeah,
we'll probably do weekly ones. So yeah, let's
probably.
do it.
All right, cool, man. Take care.
Hell yeah! All right,
Bye.
see you later.